Hey guys, welcome to the video. My name's Amanda. I am a third year vet student, and today we are going back and looking at my two vet school applications, the one that got me accepted into vet school and the one that I got rejected with. So I was cleaning up my computer the other day and I came across my two vet school applications that I had saved on my computer. Just for my own curiosity, I was comparing the two of them and it was pretty crazy to see the difference between those two applications. And it was pretty obvious why I got into vet school with one of them and why I didn't with the other. So I thought you guys might be interested in seeing both of my applications since they were two very different outcomes. So I have both of the applications on my iPad here and we are going to break down both of them, going through each section of the application, including my marks, my experience, my personal statements, and my reference letters. Hopefully by comparing the two of them, you guys will get a better idea of how to structure your vet school application, especially if you have never been through the process before. Also, I just think it's really crazy to see how different the applications were, even though they were only a year apart. So before we jump into that, if you guys want to see more videos about my vet school journey, starting from the application all the way to a DVM, make sure you subscribe down below. And make sure you like this video if you want to see more videos talking about the vet school application process. So without further ado, let's start comparing these applications. For confidentiality reasons, I'm not gonna actually show you my background information form, which is the form that we had to put all of our information into and then submit it to OVC, just because I'm not sure if I'm actually allowed to show you guys that. So I took all the information from both of my applications and put them into a Word doc so that I can share all the info and stats with you guys, just not breaking any rules, and OVC's not gonna hate me. So a little bit of background before we start. I applied to OVC in 2018 and then again in 2019. Obviously in 2018, I did not get accepted into vet school. I didn't even get invited for an interview. And then obviously in 2019 was when I got invited for an interview and then eventually got into OVC. My first application in 2018 was while I was still in third year of undergrad. So even though I did not get accepted on that attempt, I still had one more year of undergrad, and that was when I applied in 2019. So that's the backstory. Now let's jump into the first part of my background information form, which is the marks portion of my application. So the 8 prerequisite courses that I submitted for my application in 2018 included micronutrients, phytochemicals, and health, which I got a 90 in, agricultural and animal physiology, which was a 93, molecular biology of the cell, which was a 79, quantitative genetics, which was a 90, stats, which was an 83, intro to biochem, which was an 87, and then music and pop culture, which was a 93, and sociology, which was a 91. So the way the OVC application works in terms of the marks component is that it is broken down into two different sections: your 8 prerequisite courses and your last 2 full-time semesters. So my average for my prerequisite courses was an 88.25. Now, it wasn't actually listed on my application what my average was for my last 2 full-time semesters for this application cycle. So I went back into my university account and I looked at my marks that I submitted. So for my last 2 full-time semesters, one semester was a 79.8% and the other semester was an 88%. Combined, this worked out to an 83.9%. My application average for the 2018 application ended up being an 86.075%. Now, the interview cutoff for the 2018 cycle ended up being an 86.835%. So obviously my combined average of an 86.075 fell below that cutoff, and I did not even get invited for an interview. The marks section of my application was the biggest difference between 2018 and 2019 because I knew that that was what I really needed to work on for my 2019 application. So now moving on to the marks for my 2019 application, and for my 8 prerequisite courses, I actually ended up submitting 6 of the same ones as my 2018 application. The 2 main differences from my 2018 application to my 2019 application was my genetics prereq and one of my humanities prereqs. In 2019, my genetics prereq ended up being a 92% and my humanities prereq ended up being a 96%. Because I upgraded these two prereqs, my average for my prereqs in 2019 ended up being an 89.125. So that is almost an entire percent jump from my 2018 prereqs to my 2019 prereqs. Now, the other big difference was my semester averages. So like we said, my last two semester averages in 2018 ended up being an 83.9, but my last two full-time semesters in 2019 ended up being an 88.5. So this was a massive jump compared to my 2018 application and is what ended up getting me into vet school. So with my prereqs and my semesters, my overall average that I submitted in 2019 ended up being an 88.813%. In 2019, the interview cutoff was an 87.96, so I got invited for an interview and ultimately ended up doing well on my interview and getting accepted into vet school. So that is the mark section of my application broken down between 2018 and 2019. As you can see, I didn't change my prereqs very much. There was only two that I upgraded. The biggest change for me was my 2 semester averages, and I really was able to get those marks up, and in the end, it ended up paying off and I got accepted into the program. So now moving on to the experience portion of my vet school application. I will be completely honest with you guys. The experience that I submitted in 2018 was basically identical to the experience that I submitted in 2019 with a couple minor additions. So I'm not going to go in and compare the two because the numbers are basically the same. The way the OVC application works is that your experience is broken down into different components: veterinary experience, animal experience, employment experience, and extracurricular experience. For each of those categories, you can submit up to 6 different experiences. So if I went into detail about each of those, we would be here for hours. So instead, I am just going to break down each of the categories and tell you the total number of hours that I had in each of the categories. So let's start with veterinary experience. Veterinary experience is where you are directly shadowing a vet. So I worked at a clinic all through high school, but there was very few times where I was working directly with a vet. If I was in the back cleaning or if I was helping a technician restrain an animal, those hours don't count as veterinary experience. So for my application, I submitted about 350 hours of veterinary experience spread out between 4 different vets. These hours spanned all the way from high school up until I submitted my application in 4th year, and it ranged from shadowing at a small animal clinic all the way to doing an international spay and neuter clinic in Costa Rica. So that is vet experience. Now moving on to animal experience. And unlike vet experience, animal experience could be any time you were working with an animal without a vet present. For me, this was my largest experience section on my vet school application, and I had about 4,500 hours. Again, this ranged all the way from high school up until my application in university. And some of the experiences that I included were Foal Watch at the University of Guelph, being a groom in the horse industry, working with exotics at a job that I had in undergrad, as well as working with sheep on a family friend's farm. In my case, most of the hours that I had in this category came from work experience. I've talked about this in previous videos, but a lot of the experience that I put on my vet school application didn't really come from volunteering. It always came from summer jobs or part-time jobs. I was very lucky in that sense that a lot of the part-time or summer jobs that I did have, the experience that I got from them, I was able to put on my vet school application. So that leads into employment experience, and I had around 500 hours of employment experience that didn't fall under animal or veterinary experience. Some of the things that I included in this section were tutoring, as well as working reception at a veterinary clinic. And again, for this section, I included hours from high school and undergrad. Okay, moving on to the final section of the experience, and that is your extracurricular experience. For this section, I had about 350 hours, and most of this experience came from my undergrad. I was on the student council for my program in undergrad, and that was a large number of these hours. I would highly recommend getting involved on campus because it is a great way to add hours and experiences to your vet school resume. So that is my vet school experience for my 2018 and 2019 applications, there was only a couple differences. I added extracurricular hours on my 2019 application from that previous school year, and then I also added animal and employment experience from that previous summer job. But other than that, the hours and the experiences were basically the same. Okay, so that is the first two sections of your vet school application, marks and experience, and those are arguably the most important parts of your application. Now, moving on to your veterinary personal statements. So for me, there was a huge difference in my personal statements because for my application in 2019, I basically left it to the last minute. I didn't think it was going to take as long to complete, and I ended up rushing right before it was due and writing these personal statements in about 24 hours. However, in 2019, because I had gone through the experience once, I knew what the application entailed, and I knew that I needed to dedicate a lot more time to it. So for this application cycle, I gave myself about 2 months to put together my application. Now, this is specific to the OVC application, but there are going to be 3 questions that you are going to be asked to answer. One of them is, in what ways do veterinarians contribute to society, and in what ways do you hope to contribute? The second one is, considering the breadth of society we serve as veterinarians today, what attributes do you believe are essential to be successful following a veterinary education? And of these attributes, which do you possess, and how have you demonstrated these in the past? The thing that is so challenging about answering these questions is that for both of those, you have to answer them in 1,000 characters. Not 1,000 words, 1,000 characters, so every letter and every space counts as a character. OVC wants you to be very concise in your answers, so they put this limit on it to make sure that you're not rambling and you are getting to the point. If you guys have watched any of my videos, I'm sure you can imagine I struggled with this because I like to ramble. And this was something that definitely reflected in my 2018 application. Reading them back, I was all over the place in my answers. I had no structure, and you could definitely tell that I just threw these points together on a whim. So obviously for my 2019 application, that was something I knew I needed to work on. Now, moving on to the third question that OVC asks you, it says, there are many career choices following a veterinary education. What are your future career goals and why? Now, this one you have to answer in 500 characters instead of 1,000, so you really have to get to the point. My tip for this personal statement is to make sure that you are writing something that is going to stand out. There is going to be a large number of people applying to vet school who want to be small animal veterinarians. So you want to make sure you are writing something on your application that is going to stand out from all of those same statements. Even though I do want to be a small animal veterinarian, I found something within that career path that was unique to myself and my interests. You guys know I have always been interested in dentistry, and that is not something that everyone has an interest in, so I made sure I included that in my personal statement. Now, some of the overall tips that I have for your personal statements is make sure you get a number of people to read them over, and if you can, try and get a wide variety of people to read them over. You never know who on the application committee is going to be reading your essays or what background they come from, so you want to make sure you have a number of different eyes looking over these essays. I think in total, I ended up having about 7 revisions of my personal statements, and every single time I read them over, I tried to cut back useless information and really only include things that were going to highlight my skills and experience and demonstrate how I would make a good veterinary student. So that is the first 3 components. Moving on to the very last section of the vet school application, and that is your veterinary references. Now for OVC specifically, you need to have 2 veterinary references and then a personal reference. I don't actually know what my references wrote about me because the way the application works is you just submit their names and their contact information, and then OVC reaches out to them specifically, and your references will send their letters directly to OVC. I ended up using the same references for both my applications, so don't feel like you need to change up your references every single year you apply. If you have found people that are going to write you a good reference letter and that you have a strong relationship with, you might as well stick with those people every time you apply. This is your future in the program, so you want to make sure you are getting the best possible references. So there you have it. Those are the 4 different sections of your vet school application. Now, like I said, this is specific to my application at the Ontario Veterinary College in Canada, and it might vary if you are applying to schools across the world. However, those are my personal applications and what I ended up including in them in my 2018 application where I got rejected from vet school, and then how I improved on that application in 2019 where I ended up getting accepted. I hope you guys picked up some tips from this video and maybe learned from me on what not to do. Hint, don't leave your application till the night before it's due, so that hopefully when you guys go to apply to the program, the process is a little bit more smooth for you. As always, if you have any other questions about vet school or the application process, feel free to comment down below, or you can always send me a DM on Instagram. My handle is StudentVetAmanda, and I will link it down below in the description as well. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!